Now, let's get to some listener questions, and then we're going to make this somewhat short and sweet. But thank you for those who got in. I'm just going to check this thing one more time to make sure we don't have any extra. Pop. Oh, we do? Okay. Here we go. Number one, what do you think the run D is going to be about? The listener asks, is Cooper and McDuffie going to help this run game? I guess I would say, well, listen, Quay Walker is going to be part of the solution, certainly. And you expect that Cooper's going to get the starting out over McDuffie just based on where he was drafted, his athleticism, etc. He showed some flashes. Now, this guy was a real dude at A&M. This guy's a really good college football player. How's it going to translate? I don't know. Small player. All these guys are relatively small. Quay's actually the biggest guy. We have a physicality problem at the line of scrimmage, right? When they're not going downhill. So what's that going to look like? I think this run defense, look, I'm so excited that we're going to play a little bit more attacking up front. You're in nickel all the time. So when we talk about 3-4, 4-3, or 4-2, like, you're in nickel a lot, but just philosophically how you're practicing play in, play out, early downs, when they go to 22, when they go to 13, when they go to 12 personnel, when they go to 21, you're going to be in a 4-down line that is going to be a more of an attacking mindset. You can send your linebackers on different, cross dogs and looks, and you can have them play downhill a little bit more. You're going to have a safety in the box. That's going to mean something. So I just think the mechanics of how a penetrating 3 technique takes on a double team and attacks one player versus like how a 2-gapper plays, like those things are different, and it has consequences at the linebacker level. Now, how they decide to teach that and how they decide to use that athleticism, what you'd love to see is everybody have the mentality of an Isaiah McDuffie playing downhill. I've always said this, like, I just don't know if Quay's got that. He does a lot of great things. I don't know if that's one of them, if they can teach him that, or if they can just send him on more designed plays like they did last year towards the end, then you're going to have success there. Bringing in Xavier McKinney, bringing in Evan Williams, bringing in these rookie safeties is going to have a big impact. Stokes being healthy is going to have a big impact. Jay Alexander kind of getting back on the saddle is going to have a big impact. The bottom line is, can you fill your lanes and make plays? Can you make tackles when tackles are there to be made at the safety position? And then at the linebacker position, are you going to try to make plays at or behind the line of scrimmage or not? If you are, we're going to have success. If you're not and you're waiting back, it's going to be that we'll tackle them at 8 yards. You're going to have a problem. Second part of that question, can you elaborate on the Hafley defense and how it could affect Quay's skill set? I think I just said it. So basically, when you're running a 3-4, traditionally, like the 3-4 defense, the guards are open to go right at those linebackers. They have to take those guys on, right? So you're going to get like a lot more 320-pound dude running right at you without any other responsibilities, or maybe a half a quarter man responsibilities, versus when those guys are covered up, especially when you have like a shade on the center, they got to take 2. Those linebackers are going to have more creases or gaps to fill. And with the athleticism, what you're hoping is, excuse me for this, guys, what you're hoping is that they fill those gaps quickly. And those 3 techniques, those shades, are holding off those guys from getting to the second level fast. Right? What the worst case scenario in like a 3-4 is that tackle guard combo blocks that 4-eye or that 5 technique all the way up to the backer, and the backer has nowhere to go. They just see this wall of like 3 people coming at him, right? Whereas if you get the stalemate or a crease opens up because Kenny Clark takes an angle and gets leverage on that guard, and all of a sudden something's opened up and they turn their shoulders and you can shoot through. Well, those are where the big plays are. And we just need to see a little more of that, because you need to be in 2nd and long and not 2nd and 3, after a first down run. I think that's what we're looking for on a more consistent basis. If Quay can do that, then he's going to be able to really not only exploit the athleticism that he has in the passing game and laterally, but now he's going to be a guy who's a little more feared at the line of scrimmage and learn how to take on blocks. I think learning how to, block destruction, block protection, whatever you want to call it, is a skill that is very underutilized by coaching staffs in the National Football League these days. Guys that do it, like you want go watch old like Patrick Willis, Luke Kuechly film. Guys that do it at that level are next level players for a reason, right? So you go back, you watch those guys doing it, how they did it, how they played, what they did when guys were attacking them at the second level. If you can get to that place, then you're going to make a lot more plays. You're going to be a more effective player. Your defense is going to be better. So a lot of this is defensive scheme. Some of it's coaching, but a lot of it is like, let's identify what I need to work on. Let's go find guys that did it really well, see what they did, kind of identify, assess, and correct, and fix ourselves in this preseason. Question, Steno, Adam Stanovich, ex-teammate, by the way, said Jordan Morgan will compete at right guard to start because he thinks that that's like the opportunity to start on this starting five, right? Which makes sense. Thoughts on this? So here's what I think on this. Really, Sean Ryan was a part-time player. He was handed that role after the season because John Runyan Jr. was gone, but it's not a solidified position. We've talked about this at length. Zach Tom, awesome player. I don't know that Jordan Morgan is a center, quite frankly. I mean, can he? Yes. But Josh Myers does enough that you just keep him in the game until you draft somebody who's better. Obviously, Jenkins isn't going anywhere, right? I look for Jenkins to have a big year, honestly. Healthy, like for the first, it's kind of like the year after he's getting healthy. Big year. And then, I said this for a long time, like Jordan Morgan is not as good as Walker at left tackle. He's just not. And he may be someday, but for me, looking at tape, he's just not. And so I think this reinforces what I said last year when we drafted him earlier, is that's probably the position he has a chance to start. They're going to give him every opportunity. Now, the kid Sean Ryan from UCLA, you look at him and he kind of looks like Josh Sitton a little bit, like body wise, right? If he can move like that at all, then you really got some, because there's a hell of a player for the Green Bay Packers. I'll be interested to see what happens here and how he adapts. The second part of this question is, what are the difficulties going from college tackle to pro guard? And I think that's what we're talking about now. Things happen a little faster. Your leverage needs to be a little bit better. Your physicality at the point of attack needs a little bit stronger because those guys are bigger and the impact is a little bit more imminent. But from a bend and kind of range pass point or standpoint from pass pro, tackle is going to be more difficult. The angle to get to the quarterback is not as direct, but you have a lot more space to operate in unless you're getting chipped every time. But those guys are 275, where you're looking at now 300, 305 pounds, and the get off is really fast. So listen, a lot of tackles, Laramie Tunzel, Jonathan Ogden, two come to mind, Brandon Allen, those guys played guard at one point in their lives, and it doesn't hurt the process. Because maybe they have another tackle in place. They just want to get that under their belt. They want to learn how to play with the NFL pad level, which is something Jordan Morgan's going to have to learn how to do. Now he has been, but he needs to play with better leverage. And so I think all of this stuff is positive. What I would say, and I said this before when they drafted him, is, I don't know that he's a tackle. And, somebody asked the question, will Morgan be a guard permanently? Well, if he gets the spot, they're not going to move him. Like, Walker's going to be better than him for a while, especially if he's getting all the reps at left tackle. Zach Tom's not going anywhere. So right now you're looking at this like, we think Jordan Morgan's a great athlete that can play across the line. And if that means his first year he's a swing guy that plays all the positions, he's the backup, great. If he can win the starting job from Sean Ryan, great. And then we get Sean Ryan as a swing guard, right? So you're putting, and this is what Goody does, and this is what he does well. They don't have dominant offensive linemen. They just don't, they don't pay for dominant offensive linemen. What they do is they have guys that they've drafted and developed. They have a system that's very O-line friendly, and they figure out how to get really good athletes that can do a bunch of stuff. And hopefully they get to the point where they can focus on one thing and get quite good, right? Elgin Jenkins is a really good athlete who can play multiple positions, but he's pretty damn good at left guard. Rasheed Walker could probably play guard. I think he's going to be pretty damn good at left tackle. Zach Tom could play anyway. Zach Tom could play running back as far as I'm concerned, but I'm being facetious. But he's a pretty good right tackle. He's going to be pretty damn good in the upcoming years, right? And this is just what they do. So I think Jordan Morgan, I don't know that he'll beat Sean Ryan out. If I was a bet man, I'd say he would. He wouldn't. Just because I think Sean Ryan's he got a couple more years. He's already got the leverage. He's got the size. He played in games. He looked like he belonged. There was a talk, obviously, last year if he was going to beat out John Runyan Jr. Not on this show, but I think that he showed enough to say he can play in this league. And so I think Jordan Morgan's a project that has a long ways before he can be a bona fide starter in this, not a long ways, but before he can be a bona fide starter in this league. And he's just, I look at him as a Lucas Van Ness draft pick where even though he's a first round guy that's in a position where you think he should contribute immediately, like it's just, that might not be in the cards, and that has to be okay. Question. Do you think there's this is a good question. Do you think there's a correlation, between offense starting the season fast and the quality of the defense they practice against and then vice versa? Absolutely. Listen, if you're practice intensity matters. Like there's a reason that the Seattle Seahawks were so good with Pete Carroll for a long time. They practice harder than anybody else. We had a dude come from Seattle to Miami, Byron Maxwell. I said, Byron, Max, tell me about Seattle's practices. And he goes, hey, no offense, nobody here could handle their practices. It's too intense. They're too competitive. And so if you're at a high practice intensity, and that's usually what a good defense brings to the table, is high intensity practice, then you're going to be better off, especially early in the season. You're going to be better off because those guys aren't going to be, the guys you're playing against aren't going to be used to that level of intensity, the game day level of intensity. We can talk about individually you are, but just from like being in harmony and in sync, synchronized, I think that the teams that have great defenses that practice hard are going to have an advantage early on. I think that's always the case. Now, vice versa, I don't know if it works as well. Like we generally look at Green Bay historically as offense always beats the hell out of the defense, especially with Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers at the helm in preseason, right? Well, our defenses were never really as good. Maybe early in Brett's career when Reggie was here and they were, I think, top 2 or top 3, but you don't really see that very often. And so I don't know how much that helps or hurts either team, certainly because playing against Brett or Aaron every day, it makes it difficult, but you're losing almost every rep. Like every time the ball gets, they don't throw picks, right? And they throw touchdowns more often than anything else. So it's just hard to compare that to going out and playing even, Kirk Cousins week 2 or something like that. It's just different, right? So I hope that answers that. Defense has been playing well. Some people are thinking they're outplaying the offense early on. Does that translate to the regular season? Yeah, certainly. Listen, I think what happens generally in these cases, and it's so different now because there's not as many padded practices, it's not as physical, but defenses usually start faster than offenses, especially with young offenses, because the verbiage, because conceptually, like it's easier for one person to make a play on defense, whereas all 11 have to be in sync in offense for something good to happen more often than not. The calls on defense are relatively simple compared to the complexity of an NFL offensive playbook. So the mental errors and everything are going to be less, you would hope. Now, eye discipline and everything is a different factor, but you're just literally taking what's the playbook on defense look like? What's the playbook on offense look like? It's different. So you got to memorize more. There's more brain power going on there. So you can play a little bit faster early. Jaire Alexander was talking about Romeo Doubs earlier this week. There's like some 50. It basically complimenting him. So I think he said he's the number 2 wide receiver in the league behind Devontae. Whether that's true or not, I don't really care. There's so many good players out there. But does this have any indication that Jaire's playing poorly? Absolutely not. I think Jaire Alexander, I think you're going to see a really good Jaire Alexander this year. When those things happen in the locker room, when those kind of things happen, it's like, it's Robert Frost, man. Fork in the road, you got to go one way or the other. And you just feel with this guy, like this guy seems like a generally good dude that likes to play football. There's a lot of other stuff that goes on, but he's a good dude who likes to play football. I think you're going to see the best version of him this year. I really do think when you bring in a new defense and all the guys have been, listen, you could tell that these guys have been talking to each other in the locker room for the last couple of years. Like, what are we doing on defense? When Devondre left, he kind of just went, here's what's going on, right? Nobody else is going to talk about it. And they're going to say, oh, he's a sore loser and, he's sucking thumb on the way out. But that's probably what was going on. What he said I said this last year, made a lot of sense, right? Just based on what you see on tape. Bringing in a new guy was a big deal. And the fact that they pulled the trigger on that, so it's hard to fire guys, but Matt pulling the trigger on that is a very mature move for him. And certainly with the way they finished, he didn't need to do that. But that's a big move for them. I think that's a shot in the arm for this defense, and I think they're going to be a lot better off for it, including Jaire Alexander. Could you talk about what it means to be in football shape? How long into training camp did that take you? That's a good question. I'll put it to you this way. It certainly depends on how much work you put in the offseason. I think that's obvious. Some guys used to think about training camp as their opportunity to get in shape. Um, when I was at kind of my peak with the Green Bay Packers, at least that last year, I hurt my knee 3 or 4 weeks before training camp, lifting Atlas stones in Las Vegas, doing world's strongest man stuff because I'm a meathead. And I was out for like 6 weeks. So I didn't practice until week 3 preseason versus the Jacksonville Jaguars. I practiced Monday, Tuesday, Thursday off, played 2.5 quarters on Friday, felt fine because I had worked so hard up till then. So I think that has a lot to do with the fact that it was year 7 for me, and you're kind of leathered at that point. You understand the physicality of the game, and you're built up the body armor. So I think that's different by age as well. I think it certainly matters the environment that you train in. So like if I'm training in Vegas and it's 105, 110 every day, and then you go to Green Bay, like life ain't too bad, right? But if you're training in Seattle and you go down to Florida, might take a little bit longer to acclimate. Like the weather does play a big part in that. So I think it's different for everybody. For me, it didn't take very long, but I think I attribute that quite frankly to how hard I worked in the offseason. How much difference does a padded practice have versus a non-padded practice in the trenches? So the defensive ends, and listen, this is going to happen. Defensive ends have been beating our offensive tackles in like one-on-ones and all the drills, right? Rashawn Gary looks great, the whole thing. Especially against like backup guys, right? Which is exactly what you expect. What's interesting about padded versus non-padded is, and I'm talking about, I don't care if you have shorts on or shorts or pants on or not. I'm talking about shoulder pads. When you're playing like in the pass pro game in no pads, in some ways it's easier and in some ways it's more difficult because, well, for one, when you got pads on, it's really obvious where you can grab. And if like I grab your pads, you can't go anywhere. They're belted in. When I grab jersey and you turn sideways, like your jersey can go way over there, and I can just turn and I can all of a sudden get leverage on you, even though like I've kind of done what I wanted to do. Right now, if I grab you with 2 hands, it's a lot harder. But if I grab you one hand and you rip through, like there's a little bit of give there that you can kind of, it's like, doing jujitsu with a gi versus no gi. The other thing is with no pads, and it's weird because you look at high school kids doing drills with no helmets on now, and they're still like bull rushing people. I don't understand what's going on there. But with no pads, you're always kind of figuring out not how hard you should go, but like we usually used to say, hey, listen, we're not bull rushing with no pads on. Like, give us some moves. Give us some bona fide moves. You can long arm, you can chop and club, you can do all that, but we're not just gonna like put our heads in the chest and just bull. That's stupid. Again, that's weird because they're doing that in high school now without helmets. But if somebody decides to be like a tempo violator in that scenario with guys that aren't used to like what's going on, it can look a lot different. And if you're getting used to the snap, I mean, there's so many things that happen. But it's an interesting question because you usually think like, oh man, you're in pads. But I do think when you're in pads, you know exactly what to expect and what to get with. Sometimes without shoulder pads on, you don't really know, did I really win there? Did I grab there? I mean, you're like, certainly a defensive end shouldn't beat you clean with if they just have a jersey on, because nothing else, you should be able to grab it, right? They shouldn't beat you like, I don't get a hand on you. So if they're losing that way, like you got a real problem, and we just got some work to do. But pad versus non-pad, certainly it's a more physical game. You're a lot more sore after a padded practice. There's a lot more banging going on, particularly like in ones versus ones or team practice. That portion of it, there's a lot of physical action there. At least there used to be. But I don't know that if you're a good practice player and you understand that your technique is important, and you're just kind of doing everything at the same tempo regardless, I don't know that I would say there's an advantage or disadvantage to one or the other. Good question. I got 2 more on here. How will the new kickoff rules affect the game? Great question. Here's what I'd say about that. The new kickoff rules. I have been watching the European League of Football. I'm gonna work with the Frankfurt Galaxy for this next year, and so I've been watching a lot of ELF football, and they have adopted this new rule, at least a version of it, right? Or I should say, the NFL is adopting the version of the rule that they're doing, and then obviously it's what the UFL or the XFL, whatever the hell it is, doing. And quite frankly, what you see is there's a lot of innovation from the special teams coordinator. But I thought that there was going to be, I thought they were going to see a lot of different body types in there at the front line. I thought I was going to, you think you're going to see a couple pull trap plays, a couple where you're running a guy off and trying to do like a double team slip block with a guy coming from the other side. There's not a lot of big plays. There's not as many big plays as I thought there would be. I've been shocked just watching that league with those athletes. I've been shocked that there's not more big plays. And so it'll be interesting to see. Now, I really do think it would be really cool if there was a couple more John Harbaughs who were special teams guys and got to be head coaches. And I think this is one of the ways that a special teams coordinator can really stand. Rich Bisaccia could really stand out as a great innovator and coach of, or he's already a great coach, but a really good innovator based on how they attack this. Like that could be really interesting personnel wise, and obviously then where people are moving around in order to be successful. So I think that's going to be super interesting. And then the last question we had was, how do you think the O line is going to shake out? I kind of covered this. I think that you're going to have Walker, you're going to have Jenkins, you're going to have Myers. I think you're going to have Sean Ryan to start the season, and then I think you're going to have Zach Tom if everybody's healthy. I think Jordan Morgan is going to get every single chance he can to be successful and to find a starting spot. They're gonna have some battles in the preseason. Listen, Goody is got to be very, very comfortable in his position right now. He just signed this guy to a huge deal. I don't like the Aaron Jones move for reasons I've already stated, but he did bring in Josh Jacobs. He did bring in Xavier McKinney. I thought that Goody on paper had, except for, quite frankly, the first pick, because I just didn't think it fit where it was. But I think you look at Cooper, Javon Bullard, you look at Tyron Hopper, you look at Marshawn Lloyd, you look at Evan Williams. Shoot, you look at Oladapo, who brings a completely different physical element to the safety position. And then all the guys that I think he had a phenomenal draft. I think he had a phenomenal offseason cap by signing Jordan Love and obviously bringing in McKinney and Jacobs. And you just have to feel really good about this team headed into the season, given the new components they have in place. And really, this is the first full year where, at least in my opinion, I'm sure everybody else feels differently, where I'm like, Matt LaFleur is a pretty damn good head coach. And he's a good play caller, and he is proven that he can find a solution without a bona fide Hall of Fame quarterback, right? And I'm not saying he wasn't good before, but I think I said this last year, there's something to be said when you do it without Tom Brady. There's something to be said when you do it without Brett, when you do it without Aaron, right? And so that's what I mean by that. There's no shade being thrown. I just think that last year was a true reflection of how good he is as a play caller and as a leader of this program. So, man, this is going to be a fun year. We're going to do a lot of shows from a different environment. I haven't figured out the backdrop yet. So if you guys have any suggestions about what my backdrop should be, because I got like a blank wall in Germany, let me know. Until next time, hit me up at MikeWall68 on Twitter, Process to Perform on Instagram. Check this show out, like, rate, and review us on our Process to Perform channel on YouTube. And I appreciate it, guys. I'll talk to you soon.